Good afternoon, everyone. This is Antony Scandale, and I'm broadcasting from my little town here in Victoria, BC, which is roughly about 170 kilometers north of Seattle. And today I have Brad Szollose with me, who is a successful entrepreneur. So brief history about him. Brad is a global business advisor, former C-level executive of a public company, web pioneer, Generation Y millennial expert, and keynote speaker who helps smart companies like Dell and MasterCard understand how much technology has transformed corporate culture and behavior, especially the behavior of Generation Y, which is basically the millennials, and how that impacts management, interaction, and expectations in today's information age. Brad went on from entrepreneur to IPO in 3 years, co-founding K2 Design, which was the very first .com agency to go public on NASDAQ. His company experienced, now get this, a 425 hypergrowth for 5 straight years. Congratulations, Brad. I know you can hear me. So, and he's also written a book called Liquid Leadership: From Woodstock to Wikipedia, multi-generational management ideas that are changing the way we run things, and has been featured on Forbes, the Huffington Post, and New York Magazine. So please welcome Brad. How are you today?
Excellent. Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate you reading that long list of stuff. Sometimes I hear that stuff and I go, "Who is that guy?"
Yeah, that's you. Who that is, and I'm sure a lot of people want to know more about you. Especially, well, let's just talk about that first, like your history in with your business practices leading up to K2. And then, of course, we'll get into the millennial subject, which I think is a very, very important subject for all people to, especially if you're in the workplace, who have your own company, to understand that subject. But yeah, go ahead, Brad, please.
Well, I'll tell you how I started out. And for your listeners, you may want to go back to the 70s. I started my first company in, it was 1978, right there. And I don't want anybody to be impressed. I went and started a company simply because my dad made it so hard for a $20 bill that it was easier to start a company.
Right.
If you've ever had, my dad was the first generation of Hungarian immigrants born here in the U.S., so he made it a living hell to squeeze $1 out of him. And back then, $1 could get you 100 pieces of candy. So it might be not fun to be around. But anyway.
Sorry, I have to interrupt because I love my dad. Same thing, Italian immigrant. I couldn't ask him for a chocolate bar at a hockey arena somewhere if it was in the vending machine to save my life. But sorry, continue.
Mr. Fancy Pants, yeah. My dad, up until the day, I would say, "Well, Dad, in New York we do this way and we do it better." And he goes, "Oh, you think you're hot stuff, huh? Living in New York, huh, Mr. Fancy Pants?" And I would be like, "Dad, it's just," my dad is the kind of guy who will save, every single plastic carton he ever had something come in,
right,
in the back porch. It's like, what are you doing? Throw this out, Yeah. Those of us who came from immigrant families, we know that transition from one generation to the next, our parents may not get it. Simply because they weren't raised like those. They weren't raised in the same way, or expectations and things like that. So let's remember that as I go further into this and we dig into this a little more.
Sure.
I came to New York City after college to become a creative director and a graphic designer, and I went freelance right away. That was like my big thing. Everybody dreamed of going freelance. So by the time I went freelance, I was starting to work doing big corporate events, and I thought I was working with the latest technology. Until about 10 years into all this, a friend of mine who I went to college with, I had been in his wedding party with his wife and everything, and he comes to me and he says, "Hey, dude, we have to start a company together."
Right.
And Doug Cleek. And we struggled for about a year. We were like two roosters in a hen house, always fighting, and, this is the way you should do it. And after a year, he comes into the office one day, and we had good clients. I don't want you to think, it was like, oh, it was horrible. But when we started in a one room, like a 9x12 room, we didn't realize we were competing against 4,000 other companies in New York City. We didn't
Right.
think it through quite. And we did have great clients in the beginning, like American Express and Banco Popular, big bank at that time. But after a year of struggle, he walks into the office and he looks at me and he goes, "Dude, we have to become an internet company."
Right.
And what the hell's the internet? Because it's 1994. A lot of people did not know what the internet was. So we sent out a postcard, and all of a sudden, before you realize it, we're getting knocked on a door, we're getting phone calls, and people are going, "Hey, can you build our website?" And we were doing graphical user interfaces.
Right.
And we teamed up with some programmers from MIT, and we created kind of a loose alliance. And it was really bizarre, but David Setner came into our office one day. His wife worked across the hall, and
Wow.
he looked at what we were doing, and he goes, "Hey, I could sell this." And Dave actually went to the Wharton School of Business. And he just blew every door away that I had in my head about sales and how to do sales. And I even was a kind of a bit of a smarty pants. I go, "Okay, if you can sell this internet thing," because it was very new at the time,
Right.
and really horrible to design for. I said, "Well, if you can sell $1 million worth of internet services," I was like Dr. Evil. I said, "I will not only make you partner, I'll make you the CEO of the company."
Mm.
In 9 months, he sold $1.5 million worth of internet
Wow.
web services. And
Web
we went on.
services, okay.
And when he did that, I said, "Look, I'm going to get a photo of the three of us as business partners, and we'll have that, for our corporate investor relations kit and things like this," because we were thinking big at the time. And all of a sudden, Advertising Age called, and they said, "We want to feature you in an article," and this is 1995, and they could only find 10 companies around the country that did what we did, which was web design.
Oh, okay.
All of a sudden, we exploded 425% hypergrowth for 5 straight years.
That's
And
amazing.
it was crazy. But that's a great story, and that's fun and everything. But we also had to figure out very quickly how to manage this next generation of wonderkins, because everybody was acting weird. Even if they were 3 years younger than me or 10 years younger, they were driving me up a wall. And all of a sudden, I realized there's something in the Kool-Aid. This generation is doing something different. And all of a sudden, we won this award. And what it was is the Arthur Anderson New York Enterprise Award for fostering innovation among our employees. They didn't even have a word for workforce culture back then.
Right.
And that's what we wanted for. And I said, well, maybe we're onto something with this next generation, because I assumed that this would go away and it would get quiet, and all of a sudden everybody would be like, "Okay, we've moved on." But after I left K2, I started to get phone calls from people, friends of mine, who were going, "Hey, Brad, my nephew just quit his job, and he was about to make $120,000 a year, but he quit because he didn't like how his boss spoke to him."
Ah.
And I started laughing, and I started to become the, for lack of a better word, millennial whisperer. I was called that. I don't call myself that.
Right.
Because when I started writing Liquid Leadership, I really wanted to... What did I want to do? The main thing I wanted to do, when the goal, let's put it that way, for Liquid Leadership, was to explain leadership paradigms that had shifted.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it became more about millennials in the book. I even asked my wife, I said, "Do you think I have too much in here about millennials?" She goes, "Keep writing."
Yeah.
And by the time it came out in 2010, I won 2 business awards for it. And I realized, maybe I'm on to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
The long and the short of it, really. So.
Yeah, and because we are talking about millennials, and this is not to belittle or disparage this generation, because it seems to me that they do have a lot of wonderful qualities that can really take a business to the next level. And even Wikipedia said something along the lines that millennials, or Generation Y, are the demographic cohort following Generation X. There are no precise dates for when this cohort starts or ends. Demographers and researchers typically use the early 1980s as starting birth years, and mid-1990s to early 2000s as ending birth year. So that just gives you an idea of where this generation lands. But it also says, like on this other website, mentioned that millennials are now the largest generational group in the U.S.
Yes.
and have grown alongside advancements in technology and media platforms, placing them in intriguing territory with regard to media habits. So let's talk about their habits. I mean, because I'm a Generation X, and we chatted about that earlier, where I feel like I'm kind of like on the cusp of being more of a millennial kind of person. But anyways, what are some of their traits and habits that you can tell us about millennials?
First of all, I really want to point this out, and you and I are in the same camp. I don't think there's anything wrong with millennials.
Yeah.
I think what is, some of the expectations that they've been given don't pan out when they enter the workforce because they haven't been trained in that. But what has happened is people have changed over the last 100 years, but our management models have not.
Okay.
And that's what's really taking place. So if you look at some of the big consultants from the 1800s, they actually said, Frederick Winslow Taylor actually said this. He was one of the first business consultants. He was an engineer, and he basically said, workers are like cattle, and you have to treat them like that. Well, here we are 100 years later, and there's a lot of leaders who still have that attitude, whereas now when people enter the workforce, most of them are college educated. They've been taking apart computers since they were 4 years old.
Right.
And everybody's managing them as if it's 1977. And
interesting.
Let's get into this a little bit, because I know you asked this. What defines a generation? Everybody is moving the goalposts back and forth all the time on this, but it's really marketing infrastructure.
Okay.
They're not boxes to fit people into, but they are clues. And I realized my entire life I've thought, acted, and had the expectations of a millennial. So I just want everybody to know I've been paddled, I've been told off, and I've been fired, waiting for you young people to show up finally. So I'm not the only one talking crazy nonsense. And that's what most boomers hear. Even though I'm a boomer, when I open my mouth, sometimes they're like, what are you talking about? So it takes a little while to convince them.
Yeah.
But what now, a lot of us, we say that 9/11 had a huge influence on millennials. I disagree.
Right.
I grew up probably at 10 years of age. My older stepbrother was 12 years older than me, and he was concerned about being drafted to Vietnam. When I got to the same age, I was worried about getting home from school on time to see the ABC after school special. Didn't have reruns.
Right. Yeah, kidding.
I lumped into boomer thinking and boomer marketing and sales because my buying patterns are just like any other baby boomer. And that's all they give a damn about, these marketing. So millennials are thrust into this category. And I'll explain it. You're Gen X. So you were born that generation was born between 1965 and roughly 1977, in around there.
Yeah.
You were the first latchkey kids. Divorce became common in the United States. Both parents had to start working. Yep. Before one salary could come home, could pay the bills, pay the house, and you could still save 11% of your income, and you could have a car. Your wife could stay home. The kids could stay put. They didn't have to go anywhere. You didn't have to go to daycare. And so that was a different era. So right around when Gen X came along, you're the first latchkey kids, and there's a bit of cynicism that began in your minds. You don't trust certain institutions. Your bands started to reflect your attitude. The grunge came along, which was Pearl Jam and Nirvana, Living Colour, these heavy metal bands that were basically saying, hey, this is BS.
Yeah, anti-establishment.
Yeah.
Pro-war.
And wrinkled clothes became popular.
Yeah.
But something big happened. John Hughes films became mainstream. And now a new generation was looking at outliers, as Malcolm Gladwell calls them, as more interesting stories than the quarterback, who now, it used to be the hero was always in the story. Well, now the anti-hero was the main, more interesting part of the story. And that's where the shift started to take place. The outlier became normalized.
Right.
And you were the first generation. I mean, I got a taste of it, but you were the first generation to begin to use video games. Now, it was in the arcade at first, but then they came into the home with Magnavox
Atari.
And Atari.
Yep.
And then in 1984, out came, Sega.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Sega Nintendo came out, and all these games started to take on a far more robust gaming engine in them. So it was multiplayer, multi-stories, and it took sometimes 2-3 years to play and master that whole game.
Yeah.
And people don't realize, like Mortal Kombat, at that time, the Mortal Kombat brand alone was a $10 billion industry.
Wow.
Globally. That had never been seen before.
Yeah.
When the Nintendo gaming station sold something like 3 million boxes on a weekend. They had televisions didn't sell that much when first came. So nobody knew that this was going to be as big as it was. And there's this tiny little pocket between 1977 and 1984 of the lost millennial that is called Generation Y or Zillennial, they're now calling them. What a horrible name. But like the cusp baby boomers, they don't know where to put them.
Yeah.
So now everybody's concentrated on 1984 because that's when Sega and Nintendo came into the homes, and that's also when the personal computer came into the household.
Yep.
And World Wide Web. Every millennial, if you talk to them, can tell you, I remember the day when I saw a CompuServe disk arrive in the and put it in.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, if you see my TED Talk, you know that video games and technology have affected our brain more than we like to admit.
No kidding. And here, I'll say this too as a bit of a segue, because my background is television broadcasting. I have my diploma in television broadcasting from BCIT. But up the street from BCIT in Burnaby, BC, there's EA Sports. They're the ones who obviously created NHL and FIFA, and a friend of mine was a producer for both those two games. He took me into this facility, and this is in early 2000s, I think 2001, 2002. I walk in there, I'm like, the facility, basically, it blew my mind because everything was readily available to these programmers, to these kids who'd been playing all these games throughout their lives. I mean, I saw like a bunch of like an arcade facility at one end, and I saw like a bunch of couches. There's a soccer field outside. There's a gymnasium indoors somewhere. They're playing hockey, and there's glass walls, and there's enough space to you could actually put a cot and no one would be able to bug you because you've got a lot of elbow room. You know what I mean? Like it seems like it's catered to comfort and relaxation. Now, my question is this becoming more of a trend now for big businesses to kind of cater to the millennials, that they have a lot of room, a lot of space, a lot of time to relax and reflect and to kind of get their juices flowing?
Well, this goes to the work-life balance kind of thing. Remember, Gen X and millennials watch their parents work their tail off, and buy the big house, buy the nice car, live the good life, so that the next generation could have it a little easier. They all got their video games, and their bicycles or whatever they needed to feel good. And then mom and dad lost everything in 2008. Yeah. Now, they never said it directly through osmosis, but is how they got it. And it was this thinking. It's like, don't do what mom and dad did. Follow your passion, Billy. Go do something great with your life, because mom and dad had their lives sucked dry from that corporation. And you go out and live your life. So now they watch their parents work these 95-hour work weeks and then maybe take a vacation once every 3 years. They don't want that life. They don't want it at all. And I don't blame them on some level. Because, and I talk in corporations a lot. I do keynotes and workshops, and the number one thing they ask me is like, why aren't they loyal? Why aren't they loyal anymore? I said, well, who changed that? The corporations stopped being loyal back in 1974 is when it began. Right. With the passing here in the United States of the Employee Retirement Act. I said, the corporation has turned its back on people, and now people, they're not loyal. Why should they be? If you guys aren't going to be loyal to them, they're not going to be loyal to you. It's quid pro quo, as they say.
Right. So with these millennials, then, I mean, if they feel like they've been stripped away because of like mom and dad, like they don't want stuff to happen to them. What are their goals, and what are they looking for? What are they working towards? Are they looking to work less and kind of be able to travel more, or do some of these people want to own a home one day? Like what's on their minds for most of these people?
They definitely want to own a home someday, but they don't want to have the life sucked out of them by working 95-hour work weeks. They really want that balance.
Right.
And one is experiences more than they want things and buying a big house. Companies made the big mistake. I've been called into hundreds of companies where they did everything right and the millennials left. They had a foosball table. They had open areas. Lunch was paid for every single day for the chagrin of shareholders. And they had flexible hours, and you could work in the hallway. You could show up in flip-flops, and these are, financial companies. And what it boils down to is, at the core, millennials don't need to have fun at work. What they want is you to be a better leader.
Right.
And that's it. That's really where people have missed the boat. And here's what a lot of people think leadership is. They think it's control and obedience.
Okay.
For it. And now you have a worker that's coming in who doesn't obey the rules, is an independent thinker, likes to work when they feel like working, and if you let them work when they feel like working, they actually get more work done. But here's the big caveat. You have to learn to be a much less controlling leader.
Right.
Hell out of anybody who's a hierarchy junkie. And number two, you got to take age out of the paradigm of advancement.
Right.
Boomers still respect where your position is in the organization. Well, how do you do that when your organization is flat? And what it is skill set is what we need to have you on board for. And skill set can be soft skills. Big whoop, you can do WordPress all day long. You can do a Word or Keynote document. But if you're the kind of leader that can inspire your team to take over the world, that's an actual leadership skill set that they place value on. And more companies should do that.
Right. So with leadership, though, I mean, I would imagine that, or would it be okay to say that a lot of millennials in this generational group of people, that they have to learn to be more of a leader as well, as opposed to finding a leader?
Well, they're going to have to, because statistics have shown, as you spoke in the beginning of the show, the New York Times, and you can Google this, The Nation, I think, is the title, but they found out the average median age in the United States is 22 years of age.
Okay.
That means more 22-year-olds than there are 54-year-olds, which used to be the actual number. 50 and above are the people who sit down and watch television when the show is actually on.
Right.
That's what that is. So now the average median age is 22. Generation X is a much smaller component of the population, much smaller in numbers. And now you have 90 million or 85 million millennials who are coming up into leadership roles. And we don't have enough people in the Gen X arena to take over management roles if you're using age as your qualifier.
Oh, okay. Right.
So guess what? That means millennials will have to take on that role.
Right.
And the new, you can look this up in the Harvard Business Review. It's entitled "Why We Wait Too Long to Train Our Leaders."
Okay.
They did a study, and they found out, I think it's out of 17,000 people, this one guy discovered that went through his leadership training programs. They didn't get the leadership training until they were in their 40s, mid-40s. But almost everybody had spent a decade in a leadership role. That means 10 years of making bad decisions and making wrong decisions. And now you have a generation that wants to get in the leadership arena sooner, and you're going to wait till they're in their 40s to give them leadership training, or you're going to wait till they're 35 to give them leadership training. That should be day one.
Right.
Leadership development training for the 21st century. And most companies don't know how to do it because, or they don't want to, because it's the ROI on this, return on investment, seems like it's just a lost leader. It's like, I'm, pardon me, for those of you listening in, I'm pissing money away to the wind, and they're going to leave. But as the old joke goes, the CFO goes to the CEO. The CFO says, "Hey, why are we training people if they're going to leave?" And the CEO says, "Well, if we don't train them, they stay. What do we got?"
Yeah.
It has to be an ongoing, always on leadership development at any company.
I agree with you 100% with that. But now my next question is, though, like, how do you keep them focused? Because I'm sure that a lot of millennials, there's that little adage that they if they're watching a video, you've got like maybe 2 minutes to convince them. Otherwise, they'll swipe to the right and watch something else. You know what I mean? Like, how do you keep them engaged? Like, especially wanting to learn about leadership.
Antony, that's called shiny object syndrome. Michael Bay movies are, every 10 minutes there's somebody blowing up. There's a car crash. 10 minutes, you're like, oh my God, I got to watch this movie.
Yeah.
You actually have to teach this next generation how to work. What are the rules at your company? And this is the thing. You have to drop the rules that don't work anymore. Not all of them, but you have to drop the rules that don't work anymore and adopt rules that get you results.
Okay.
So some companies, what they do is they just automatically pay people more money, and they tell the person, look, I don't care when you get the work done, you just have to meet your deadline, and you have to get it done by this time, and you have to reach out to your team if you feel like you're not going to get it done. So it puts more responsibility into the hands of the new employee. And this thing, we never really have explored this, but most of your management models come from the military.
Yeah.
So everybody figures out a certain way of doing things, and then they're advanced because they achieved that goal or they memorized enough stuff. Well, even if a person knows something up to 70% of it, they get passed on and they get elevated in rank. Well, here we are, 400 years later, if you want to really look at the numbers in the timeline, and we're trying to fit these people into boxes that have been trained differently. Video games have trained them differently. They've been asked to speak back and speak up and collaborate with their teachers and their parents. They've gotten more work done in the digital world than you could ever imagine. Over 10,000 hours, as Anders Ericsson talked about in Malcolm Gladwell's book. It takes 10,000 hours to master something.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't just master it. They decimated it. And so now they're coming into your work environment, and they may not know they should work on Saturdays. They may not know they can't dress like that to walk into the office. As a matter of fact, I've heard women have had to go up to other women who are millennials and say, you can't dress that way. And the millennial looks at them and goes, you're just jealous. No, that's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Or some guy, I had some guy show up for an interview after I left K2. I started a little e-commerce company, and I was still on the board of directors at K2. But during the day, I was building e-commerce sites. And this one guy we called up to interview, he puts his feet up on his desk. And remember, this is like the late 90s. And he looks at me and I go, do you have a resume? A paper resume? And he goes, oh, no, you're going to have to go on my website to get it. And this is at a time of 56K modems. So I went on the website, I got it, and it was some weird sexual name. And he goes, I built that website because of a love affair I had with an older woman. I said,
jeez.
And then he was dressed like a game show host, a black suit, black, red, burgundy red shirt. Accomplishments he made. I had been in the New York Times at that time, and I just looked at him, and at 10 minutes into the interview, I said, did you do anything to prepare for this interview? And he just looked at me shocked, like I was supposed to worship the ground he walked on.
Right.
I think we're done here. I think we're done with this interview. And he looked at me like, what? I said, look, you have to put your best foot forward for me. And you're not doing that. You're telling me how incredible you are and all this. I said, do you know who I am? Because at the time, I'm not trying to be arrogant. I was in, all the magazines, my picture. And he's sitting there trying to flaunt his ego and all his accomplishments. Dude, I am willing to give you a chance, but you don't come into the interview, trying to be making more money than the owners of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you haven't gotten there yet. I escorted him out. I took him out right in the middle of the interview.
Wow.
I said, you can win me over. And at that time, I was confused. I was like, what is going on? And we would interview somebody else, and we asked her about her previous employers. She went off in a vitriolic rant that I thought she had been drinking. That's how angry she was. Bad-mouthing her previous employers, some nationalist comments about them, and on and on and on. And I looked at my business partner at the time, and I looked at him like, is this actually happening? Is this candid camera? And remember, that was like 98, 99.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I would go online and look at your resume, and those things are kind of normal. But the millennials have been raised to have very high self-esteem. As a matter of fact, they've been taught that there is no real authority figure based on age. Like, they don't have to look at you because you have 25 or 30 years of experience and respect that. Mm-hmm. Instead, they ought to talk back and treat the boomer as if they're a boomer themselves. Right. Like, we're at the same level. We're peers, baby. And that can be seen as a sign of disrespect in some companies. Now, I'm not saying all millennials do that. They do respect that. But the thing is we have to realize that's where the behavior comes from. And they might actually not realize they have a huge amount of training that they need to go through to even understand that they just made a huge mistake in the behavior norms within any company.
Right. So, could you leave us with 3 tips for millennials as they're entering into the workforce?
Sure. First of all, I know you're awesome and you go for the big stuff and you dream big, but sometimes the opportunities are right in front of you that you might miss because you're impatient. Okay. Give it a little time, because I've found that mistakes I've made in my own career are that I didn't stick around long enough at a company and it just started to get good. Mm-hmm. And millennials need to understand you are an independent thinker, which means you have an entrepreneurial mindset, but that doesn't mean you're going to start a company. You have to find companies that respect your individual participation in the corporate culture.
Right.
Okay, and so there's a lot of companies that when you show up, they just look at you and you go, you're a kid. You might not want to work at a place like that. Whereas maybe you're an accountant and you have an opportunity to work for Disney for the next 7 years, and they don't pay you great. They kind of suck when it comes to the way maybe they treat you in the getting advanced, or maybe it's union. You may want to just stay there and stay put because Disney is going to be on your resume.
Right. Yeah. Very good. So that's number 1. So give it time. Yeah, love it.
Number 2, I would say find a mentor as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay, this one here, sorry to interrupt. This one here I wish I had a long time ago. But yes, continue.
Too.
Yes.
Hey, we were never taught, we didn't need mentors, and I'll tell you why. If you wanted to be a teller at a bank when I was a kid, a teenager, that was a summer job.
Yeah.
You didn't go to college to become and then wind up as a teller at a bank. You were taught and trained how to count money and how math worked while you were in school. So you didn't need any training. You didn't need any polish. You went in. And the way to work your way up in any company, it didn't matter what it was, whether it was hotel management or it was running a corporation, you went in and you worked in each job that you needed to do to rise up in the pyramid of the hierarchy of that company.
Right.
But today, you come in and you might have an MBA, and you may have passed all your classes, and you may be hot stuff, but you have so many huge chunks of information missing that you need to know, whether it's behavior or etiquette or how to get ahead faster. You need to find somebody quickly that you resonate with in the company and ask them to be your mentor.
Okay.
This happens. I don't know if you know Jordan Harbinger. who has the podcast Art of Charm. I've been on his podcast, and he got ahead because when he started at this law firm, they were working 95-hour weeks, and they were doing all the case law and doing the research. And this one guy showed up one night, dressed to the hilt, walked around the office, said hello, and left. And he goes, why doesn't that guy have to stay and do all the work we're doing? And somebody said, because he's brought in more money into this firm than all the partners have ever seen in the 20 years they built this company.
Wow.
And Jordan decided, I want to know that guy's secret. And what he discovered is the guy taught him it's relationships.
Yes.
Jordan learned to get business in and do the relationships. If you are horrible at the detailed work, then you got to contribute something to that company.
Right.
So the mentorship path will help you figure it out quicker for yourself, because a lot of people, I hate to say it, and this leads me into number 3, what you majored in college may not be the right skill set for what you bring to a company. And I'll explain that. A buddy of mine actually hired me out on Long Island, New York. He had one of the best and brightest design firms in the country. And he said, I have a problem employee. I said, what's the problem? He said, he's one of our top programmers. He's incredible. But when he stands up in meetings, he doesn't know to sit down and shut up. He doesn't take facial cues very well. He's
right.
Like, and so he's rambling on and on and on and on and on. And they're like, you got to sit down. And he's talking high-tech stuff. So the client is bored out of their mind. And he's brilliant. Like, they cannot lose this guy. He can program a dashboard in his sleep. Knows all the programming languages. I said, well, take him out to lunch and find out what he's passionate about. So he did. Calls me up. He says, he loves to write. I said, all right, put him with your team that pitches new jobs. Do that. And so what he did is he put him into the writing pool. He wrote such eloquent and beautiful pitches. They started to go from going after business that was under $1 million to landing $3 and $4 million accounts.
Right.
Because the kid just knew how to write and do things and do all these great things. And then here's the other thing. They provided him with training on giving a speech, giving a presentation, and knowing when to sit down. So your skill set, you may be lacking in that one piece that could make you brilliant, or you may have to be moved to a different department. You know,
right.
Like you may have majored in accounting, but you're better and more passionate in the design field, maybe doing the marketing for the company.
Right.
So figure that out for yourself, because a lot of millennials have listened to all their teachers telling them, you need to go to college, and you need to do this, and you need to follow your passion. And they follow their passion, and that's not really what they want to do. They want to do something else that fires them up inside. Yeah. And like my dad said, and maybe your immigrant father said this too, that look, 2/3 of your waking life are going to be spent working. So you better figure out what you want to do with your waking time.
Yeah.
So you do something you like. By the way, I'm cleaning that up for you.
So with the three tips that you gave us here, which the first one was give it time, the next one is get a mentor, and then always was about what you majored in isn't going to translate all that well with your company. So as a whole, what I'm hearing from this is that you have to just be humble.
Yeah. And I know that you may not even know what that means, because if you have been taught your whole life you're equal to a boomer and that's a peer, you have to realize the 20 years of experience you do not have is a handicap. That is your blind spot. I'm not saying it's the only one, because you guys bring to the table an amazing amount of technological experience, the ability to work and multitask in ways that we can't. Our physical brains just cannot take that on. And at the same time, you're embracing big thinking and embracing going for the gusto and going through really great things. But be patient. I know a lot of millennials have had a lot of stress put on them that if they're not successful by the time they're 27, they're a failure.
Right.
And that's true. There are lessons in your life that you're not going to learn until you're in your 80s and you're on your deathbed.
Yeah.
And you oh, that's why that happened. But I will tell you this, and this is something your listeners might enjoy, Antony. Every millennial that I know of has a side hustle.
Mm.
And that side hustle is usually the thing they're actually passionate about.
Right.
So if you're listening and you've got a side hustle that's making you either equal to or more money than your day job, you might want to throw yourself into that side hustle at some point. Because let's face facts, it's not going to get easier with this economy.
No.
It's not going to get easier buying a house. Recent statistics said that millennials are paying 3 times more money for rent, monthly rent, than their grandparents did.
Wow.
So if I were you, I'd just, figure out what your side hustle is. My nephew, I've raised 3 millennials, so I know them pretty well. I can tell you this. I ask millennials. I don't assume. I'm not one of these boomers who runs around and goes, well, these kids today. I sit and I call up my nephew and I go, Sebastian, what do you think of this? And he'll go, Uncle Brad, we don't think that way at all.
Right.
And so he's really good. I mean, he runs a television studio for CBS in Albany now. That was his dream job, and he got it. What I've learned from him is his real passion. Like, he can do video production without a thought. I mean, it's like he did some of my first keynote videos in 10 minutes, and he apologized to me. He was like 12 years old. He goes, I'm sorry, Uncle Brad, it took so long, but I just downloaded the software just now. You get away from me, you evil child. How do you do that?
Yeah.
But he's an amazing DJ. That's another thing he does. He's incredible when it comes to video production. And he runs a tight ship. I taught him, if you're going to be good in business, you've got to be so professional and expect the very best out of everybody. And if they don't bring it up to your level, you yell at them. You get them on board. You've got to have, because this isn't like any other profession. Television production is a time-based, commodity.
Absolutely.
Live. And he does a lot of sporting events. So he's learned that since day one. And so every millennial has their side hustle that I think is going to become their main hustle at some point.
Right. Well, Brad, thank you very, very much for joining me today. We're almost 45 minutes into this conversation. I could talk to you for hours. Yep. Maybe we can do this again sometime, hopefully. Before you go, where can the listeners find you? I see that they can reach you at info@liquidleadership.com. Where else can they find you?
Well, you can go to my blog, read some of my blogs, liquidleadership.com. Once you learn how to spell my last name, I'm also at bradszollose.com. And just, check out my videos. Email me at info@liquidleadership.com or brad@liquidleadership.com. And if you want to get on board with my newsletter, and we're going to be launching a monthly interview series. If you want to get in on that, that's a paid subscription. It's not that much, but get involved and tell Antony, by the way, what you enjoyed about this show and other questions you might have. So you can do that as well. Because you're right, we could talk for days about this subject.
Yeah.
There's so many levels, like how can millennials manage people that are twice their age? How can we hire better in the 21st century? How can you find people that are willing to work hard? These are questions that everybody has. What's the future of business? What's the future of academia? What's the future of government? What's the future of everything? And why aren't millennials running for office more?
Yeah, exactly. That's another topic, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Again, thank you again, Brad. This is Antony Scandale. If you'd like to find more about me, you can go to my website at antonyscandale.com. If you want to get a copy of my book, which is Let Go, A Little Guidebook to Freedom, you can find that at letgobook.net, or you can find it on Amazon. It's called Let Go, A Little Guidebook to Freedom. Just type it in, you'll see my name there. And also, Brad and I we collaborated with the book called Positive Mental Attitude, which we're both proud to say that it went international bestseller. And it's a fabulous book. I love it. My chapter's in there. If you'd like a copy of that, you can also find it on Amazon. So again, we'll talk to you soon in a couple weeks. Have fun, and remember, ignite your inner power and watch your world change. And we'll talk soon. Take care.